Welcome to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigate. I'm investigative reporter Sierra Cummings, joined now by investigative reporter Andy Parati. Good afternoon, Andy.
Hi, Sierra.
I love this story. So many gems in there, including pizza, one of my favorite meals. Walk us through taxation through citation.
Yeah, so on the surface, it sounds like we're doing a story about speed traps in Georgia, but it's much more than that. It's about cities accused of using their police departments to generate money to fill in budget gaps. And there are potential long-lasting consequences in trust in law enforcement.
Order T67, your order's ready?
Sophia Farisi's family business must sell a lot of pies to make a profit.
The margarita, this one is also a top seller, but our best seller is just like a typical cheese slice. Thank you.
While her Atlanta pizzeria counts on repeat customers to stay open, Sophia recently visited a small Georgia town. She believes relies on too much dough from out-of-town drivers to exist.
He comes behind me and he starts, the sirens go off and whatever. So I pull over and I'm like, thinking the worst.
This past January, police ticketed Sophia for an expired tag while driving through the city of Dillard, about 2 hours north of Atlanta. This is the picture she took of her traffic stop. It cost her about $200. According to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, Dillard collected $315,000 from fines and forfeitures in 2022. That's 44% of the entire city's budget for a town of about 300 people.
Numbers don't lie, so you see the percentages, and if the number is that high, it's definitely more about making money than keeping people safe.
While Dillard isn't the only city that banks on traffic citations for a big slice of its budget, an Atlanta News First investigation uncovered no other town in the state relies on the profit from its police force more than the city of Lenox, which covers less than 2 square miles in South Georgia. In 2022, it collected $1.3 million from citations. That's nearly 73% of the town's budget.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Atlanta News First Investigates spoke to a dozen drivers ticketed by Lenox police this year.
This is a scam.
All say the amount of citation revenue the city collects makes them question the police department's motives.
And I do think it creates somewhat of a distrust with your law enforcement.
And it makes you just question how valid a lot of these citations are.
Of the 361 citations police issued for the first 2 months of this year, records show just 5 were on Lenox streets, the remaining Interstate 75, which runs straight through the city.
That sounds like the old TV show, The Dukes of Hazzard.
Come into my parlor, said the spider to the bee.
They've created a police force to be a revenue-generating operation in that town.
You city boys have no idea.
When the Lenox police chief and the mayor declined to be interviewed, we drove 3 hours south of Atlanta to attend its city council meeting.
With so much revenue coming from traffic citations, some question, what's the real motive? Safety or raising revenue? Do you understand that concern?
Stops no one unless they're doing over 90 miles an hour up there.
It's hard to hear, but that's Mayor Henry Baker explaining that his officers only ticket drivers who speed more than 90 miles per hour. But Atlanta News First uncovered the first 2 months of this year, 40% of his citations were for non-speeding offenses, like tinted windows and obscured license plates.
Could your city operate or even exist without all of this traffic citation revenue?
I have no comment on that.
Okay.
I have no comment, is how he responded. While the mayor declined to answer our question, here's what a member of the city's fire department told us.
Then it goes to the revenue away from a town like this, the town would become a ghost town because people in this town cannot afford to have their property taxes raised.
Georgia law allows the Department of Public Safety to revoke speed detection device permits from cities when ticket revenue exceeds 35% of police departments' budgets. But that cap only involves tickets for speeding. a loophole that allows cities to collect as much revenue as they want from other traffic offenses.
So that's usually why people call it taxation by citation, is it's a politically attractive alternative.
Victorio Nastasi is the director of criminal justice for the Reason Foundation. In a report released earlier this year, the libertarian think tank called on Georgia to cap ticket revenue to 10%. Money collected above that threshold would be sent to a state-run crime victims compensation fund. That cap doesn't prevent municipal law enforcement from writing tickets, but creates less financial incentives for issuing tickets.
So I think that kind of solution is more directly addressing the problem and doesn't have the same issues of tying law enforcement's hands as the current law has.
That requires lawmakers to take action, and lucky for us, one of the most prominent in the Georgia legislature attended the same Lenox City Council meeting. State Representative Penny Houston, chair of the House Appropriations Committee.
And I just want to come here today and say thank y'all for the 26 years of support y'all have given me.
She found nothing wrong with the city's traffic citation revenue.
If they're going 90 miles an hour, they ought to be a damn expense.
If there's such a big public safety concern with people speeding on 75 through these small towns, why not fund more positions in highway patrol instead of these small towns doing it?
Well, maybe the small towns can do it cheaper.
We have to make dough every day, every single day.
Georgia cities accused of subsidizing budgets with citations instead of taxation, a practice some believe is a recipe for disaster with trust in law enforcement.
It's just really unfair and ridiculous.
I mean, watching that story, Andy, you're such a bulldog. You made the decision to go to city council to get answers.
Yeah, it was a little uncomfortable when I got there, but they really left us with no choice. I spoke to the mayor on the phone a couple of weeks before this city council meeting, and I asked him if he would do an interview, and he said no. We arrived. I tried to sign up for the public speaking part, only to find out that I was the only person in the room that wasn't affiliated with the city. But I will give credit to the mayor that he did allow me to ask a few questions. And you heard his answer. He didn't deny that the city would not be able to exist without this traffic citation, which I think what he didn't say speaks volumes.
Yeah, I'm going to look at my notes here because I want to get into the numbers, and they're really important to me. So there was 145 non-speeding citations. That is a significant portion of those fines, right?
Yeah, it's like 40% of all the citations that were written by Lenox Police Department officers within the first 2 months of this year were not speeding violations. And the reason why that is important is because Georgia has a law on the books that says if the town writes tickets, speeding tickets in particular, that exceed 35% of the police department's revenue, the state can investigate and potentially revoke the speed detection device permits from the city. But the state still has to prove that they're doing it in a way where they're trying to elicit a profit, not necessarily just writing a bunch of tickets.
And the state agency, which has some level of oversight, just talking about that law you're mentioning, it's the Department of Public Safety, right?
Yeah, and they have investigated about 19 different cities for this since 2019, only citing a handful of them essentially temporarily withholding their permits to write speeding violations.
This has been a story that's been a top performer for us on air and online, but I'm curious, what's been the public reaction so far? It seems like a lot of us can relate to feeling like maybe we're trapped or tricked by citations.
Yeah, it definitely hit a nerve for a lot of people. I've heard from people across the state trying to tell me their town is a speed trap as well. We also heard from an attorney who represents many of the municipalities in South Georgia that have been accused of generating a lot of revenue with traffic citations. There's about 17 in the state. Most of them are in South Georgia. And this attorney essentially admits he defends these cities and says, listen, these cities have a declining tax base. There's not a lot of industry there, and taking away their ability to generate revenue through these traffic citations would be detrimental to those towns.
I want to go a little bit behind the scenes here. Some people might be wondering, how do we come up with our stories?
Yeah.
How did you find some interest in this one?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is just the reporter that got stopped in one of these cities and immediately wanted to start investigating. That actually isn't true.
Okay, good. I'm glad you cleared that up.
The Reason Foundation issued their report in earlier this year in February, and it really sort of dove into the issue of taxation through citation. So I reached out to them. We had a few conversations. So their report, I got to give them credit. They're the reason why that I started looking into this. They use numbers from 2019 identifying these cities collecting a lot of revenue from traffic citations. We updated our data using mostly 2022 numbers.
And I do want to circle back around to that strip of highway there because what it seems like is people would just be driving through that area even if they are not a resident of the city of Lenox, right?
Yeah, most of these small towns cut right through, most of these small towns had Interstate 75 that cut right through them.
Got it.
And a lot of people from out of state, especially Ohio, Alabama, North Carolina, they use 75 to go on vacation to Florida.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people that we interviewed via Zoom were people that lived out of state. And when you have so many people complaining from out of state, they don't really get that much attention from either journalists or lawmakers because they're not constituents, they're not viewers. But we reached out to dozens of them, and I'm glad that we were able to hear their voices and their concerns.
It really affects so many of us. This was excellent reporting. Thank you so much, Andy. You have been watching and listening to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. Don't forget, you can like, subscribe, follow, listen, and watch wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.